I'm really glad you're here tonight. This hour is different from the rest of the day. It doesn't ask you to decide anything. It doesn't ask you to perform or explain or keep up. It simply invites you to lie still and let your thoughts move at their own pace. As the years pass, nighttime becomes a kind of companion, a place where the mind is free to wander without interruption, where memories return, not urgently, but patiently, where understanding settles in quietly, without needing words. Later in life, the mind doesn't race the way it once did. It reflects, it revisits, it connects dots that once seemed unrelated, and it does this most honestly when the lights are off and the world has gone silent. This space is for those thoughts, the ones that don't surface during the day, the ones that arrive only when you're alone with yourself, resting, remembering, and gently making sense of a long, lived-in life. So take a slow breath, let your body soften into the bed, and allow this night to meet you where you are. And now, before we begin, if this kind of honest, gentle reflection speaks to you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And down in the comments, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are right now. There's something comforting about knowing we're all here together, scattered across time zones, but united in these late hours when the world finally grows still. So settle in, adjust your pillows, find a comfortable position, and know that for the next hour, you're not alone in whatever wisdom you're carrying, whatever understanding you've earned, whatever truths rise to the surface when the lights go out. Let's begin. You're lying in the darkness now, and your mind is awake in that particular way it only is at night. Not anxious exactly, not restless in the way younger people are restless, just awake, present, aware. This is familiar to you, this nighttime wakefulness. It's been your companion for years now, decades perhaps. You've learned not to fight it, not to panic when sleep doesn't come immediately, not to reach for the clock to check how many hours you have left before morning. You simply lie here and you think. The thoughts that come now are different from the thoughts that came when you were younger. Back then, your mind raced forward constantly, planning, worrying, calculating what needed to happen next, always ahead, always preparing for a future that felt urgent and demanding and impossibly important. But now, your mind moves differently. It circles, it returns, it settles on moments from the past, not with regret exactly, though sometimes with that too, but with curiosity, with the desire to understand what actually happened, what it all meant, how the pieces fit together into the story of your life. You think about time itself, how strange it is, how it felt infinite when you were young and feels suddenly finite now. Not in a frightening way necessarily, just in a real way, an honest way. You understand now that time is the substance of life, that every moment you've lived has been made of time, and that the time remaining, whatever amount that is precious in a way you couldn't have understood before. When you were young, you spent time carelessly. You wasted hours, days, years sometimes. You acted as if there would always be more, as if time was an endless resource you could squander without consequence. You stayed in jobs you hated, in relationships that drained you, in situations that served no purpose except habit or fear or the inability to imagine something different. You think about those wasted years now, not with harsh judgment. You've moved past that, but with a kind of gentle sadness, a wish that you'd known then what you know now, that you'd valued your own time more, that you'd been braver about leaving what wasn't working, that you'd understood sooner that life is short and time is the only thing you can never get back. But you also understand that this is what aging is, this accumulation of knowledge that comes too late to change the past, this wisdom that arrives after the mistakes have already been made, this clarity that sharpens precisely when there's less time left to use it. You think about the people you've lost. They come to you often at night, not as ghosts exactly, not as hauntings, but as presences, as memories so vivid they feel almost like visitations. You see their faces, you hear their voices, you remember specific moments with them with a clarity that surprises you. Your parents come to you, if they're gone now. You think about them differently than you did when they were alive. When they were here, you saw their flaws so clearly, their limitations, their failures, the ways they disappointed you or hurt you, or failed to be what you needed. But now, lying here in the darkness, you think about them with more compassion, more understanding. You realize they were just people, imperfect people, doing their best with whatever tools they had, whatever wounds they carried, whatever limitations shaped them. You see now how young they were when they had you, how unprepared, how scared probably, how they were figuring it out as they went along, just like you figured it out with your own children, just like everyone figures it out. There's no manual, no perfect way, just people trying not to damage the small humans in their care while dealing with their own damage. You wish you could tell them you understand now. You wish you could have one more conversation where you approach them not as their child, still carrying childhood wounds and resentments, but as an adult who has lived enough to recognize how hard it all is, how impossible sometimes, how everyone fails at parts of it. But that conversation isn't possible. They're gone, or they're too old now to have that kind of talk, or the relationship was too broken for too long, or they wouldn't understand what you were trying to say, or you wouldn't be able to find the words anyway. So you lie here and you forgive them silently, in the darkness, without them ever knowing. You release the old angers, the old disappointments, not because they didn't matter, not because the hurt wasn't real, but because carrying it serves no purpose anymore, because you're old enough now to understand that forgiveness is something you do for yourself more than for the other person. You think about your own children if you have them. This weighs heavy some nights, heavier than almost anything else. The question of whether you did right by them, whether you gave them what they needed, whether you damaged them in ways they'll spend their own lives trying to heal from. You remember specific moments, times you lost your temper, times you were too strict or too lenient, times you were absent when they needed you present, times you said something cruel out of exhaustion or frustration, times you failed to protect them from something you should have protected them from. These memories ache. They sit in your chest like stones. You can't undo them, can't go back and be different, can't erase the moments where you were less than you wanted to be, less than they deserved. But you also remember the good moments, the times you got it right, the times you showed up fully, the times you provided exactly what they needed, the ordinary moments of care and attention and love that maybe they don't even remember, but that you know mattered, that shaped them, that gave them something solid to stand on. You hope the good outweighed the bad. You hope they remember you kindly. You hope they understand you were doing your best even when your best wasn't good enough. You hope they've forgiven you for your failures the way you've forgiven your own parents. But you don't know. You can't know. They're living their own lives now. They have their own nighttime thoughts, their own processing to do, their own understanding to arrive at. You can't control how they remember you, how they make sense of their childhood, what stories they tell about you. This letting go is part of what runs through your mind at night. This acceptance that you don't get to write the final draft of who you were to other people. You don't get to control the narrative. You can only hope that love came through, that despite everything, despite all the mistakes and failures and limitations, they felt loved. They felt valued. They knew they mattered to you more than anything else. You think about your body, how it's changed, how it keeps changing. This is unavoidable at night. Your body makes itself known in ways it didn't when you were younger. It aches. It's stiff. It needs adjustment. It wakes you up with discomfort or the need to use the bathroom or simply with its own restlessness. You have a complicated relationship with your body now. It's betrayed you in ways. It doesn't do what you want it to do anymore. It's limited you. It's become unreliable. You can't trust it the way you once did. You make plans and your body decides whether those plans are actually possible. This is frustrating, sometimes infuriating. You remember when your body was strong, capable, when you could move through the world without thinking about it, without planning around limitations, without having to consider whether you have the energy or the strength or the balance to do simple things. You remember taking your body for granted, never appreciating what it could do, never being grateful for its health and strength and reliability. You were too busy criticizing it, too busy wishing it looked different, too busy comparing it to other bodies and finding it lacking. What you wouldn't give now for that body you once criticized, that body you thought wasn't good enough, that body that worked perfectly and you didn't even notice, but lying here at night, you also feel something else toward your body. Something like gratitude, something like respect. This body has carried you through an entire life. It survived everything you've put it through. Every accident, every illness, every stress, every late night and early morning, every physical demand, every emotional blow that manifested physically. Your body has been with you for every moment of your existence. It's the only constant companion you've had from birth until now. It's housed your consciousness. It's allowed you to experience the world. It's given you pleasure and sensation and the ability to move through space and time. It's tired now, worn out, but it's still here, still functioning, still carrying you forward day after day. This deserves recognition. This deserves appreciation, even as you mourn what's been lost. You think about intimacy, about sex, about physical connection. This is complicated territory. Some nights you miss it desperately. The feeling of being desired, the pleasure of touch, the closeness of bodies joined together, the particular vulnerability and openness that sex allows. If you have a partner still, you might miss the way sex used to be between you. When you were younger, when desire came easily, when bodies worked reliably, when you had energy and flexibility and fewer inhibitions, when sex was frequent and varied and exciting. Things have changed now. Maybe sex is less frequent. Maybe it requires more effort, more planning, more accommodation of physical limitations. Maybe it's simply different, slower, gentler, more focused on closeness than passion, more about comfort than excitement. This is a loss. You can acknowledge that. The loss of that easy physical passion, that uncomplicated desire, that feeling of being overwhelmed by wanting and being wanted. You miss it sometimes. You grieve it in ways you don't talk about. But maybe you've also found something else, a different kind of intimacy, one that's deeper because it includes everything you've been through together, all the years, all the challenges, all the ways you've seen each other at your worst and stayed anyway. Maybe sex now is rarer, but more meaningful, more tender, more about expressing love than satisfying urges, more about connection than performance. Maybe it's better in some ways, even as it's diminished in others. Or maybe you're alone now. Maybe your partner is gone, deceased or divorced or simply absent. Maybe the last time you had sex was years ago, decades ago. Maybe that part of your life is over and you know it's over and you're trying to make peace with that. This is its own kind of grief. The closing of that door, the recognition that something that was once so important, so central to your identity and your relationships and your sense of yourself is finished. You'll never experience it again. That particular form of connection is no longer available to you. Some nights, this sits heavy. You remember what it felt like. You miss it. You feel the absence of touch, of being wanted, of being seen as desirable, of experiencing pleasure in your body, of sharing that kind of vulnerability with another person. Other nights, you've made peace with it. You've redirected that energy elsewhere. You've found other forms of connection, other ways of experiencing intimacy, other sources of pleasure and meaning. You've accepted that life changes, that not everything lasts, that every season has its own gifts, even as it requires letting go of what came before. You think about friendship, about the people who've walked beside you through the years. Some are still here, some are gone, some have drifted away without any dramatic ending. Just distance, life, different paths, the natural attrition that happens over time. The friends who remain are precious. You know this. You value them in ways you didn't when you were younger and took friendship for granted. Every conversation now feels more significant. Every shared meal, every laugh, every moment of understanding. You're aware that time is limited, that these relationships won't last forever, that every gathering might be the last. This awareness makes you more present, more appreciative, less likely to waste time on superficial things, more likely to say what matters, to express love and gratitude, to be honest about what you're thinking and feeling, to allow yourself to be truly known. You think about the friends you've lost through death or distance or disagreements that couldn't be repaired. You carry regrets about some of these losses, things you wish you'd said, conflicts you wish you'd resolved, time you wish you'd made for them when they were still available. You understand now that relationships require tending, that they don't maintain themselves, that you have to choose them actively and repeatedly, that it's easy to let them slip away through neglect or busyness or the assumption that there will always be time later. But there isn't always time later. People die, people move, people change. Opportunities for connection pass and don't return. You know this now in ways you didn't before, and it makes you hold the remaining friendships more carefully, more consciously, with more intention and more gratitude. You think about work, about the career you had or didn't have, the years spent earning money, contributing, building something, or trying to, or failing to, or never quite figuring out what you were supposed to be doing. If you're retired now, this sits strangely. That whole portion of your life is over, done. The thing that organized your days and gave you structure and purpose and identity for decades is finished. You no longer go to that place, see those people, perform those tasks. That version of yourself doesn't exist anymore. Some people grieve this deeply. They felt valued at work, important, needed. They knew what they were supposed to do and they did it well. And that gave them a sense of purpose that retirement has taken away. They feel lost now, untethered, like they don't know who they are without the work that defined them. Others feel liberated. They spent years doing work they didn't care about or actively hated. Work that drained them. Work that served someone else's purpose, but never their own. Retirement freed them from that, gave them back their time, allowed them to finally pursue what actually matters to them. Most people feel both things. They're glad to be done with the stress and the obligations and the demands. But they also miss the structure, the social connections, the sense of being useful, the clear purpose each day provided. You think about what you accomplished in your working life, whether it mattered, whether you made a difference, whether you left anything behind that will outlast you, or whether you simply showed up and did what was required and earned money, and that was enough. You realize now that most work is forgotten almost immediately. The things that felt so urgent and important at the time are gone now. No one remembers. No one cares. The company moved on. The projects were replaced. Your contributions, which felt significant while you were making them, dissolved into the past without leaving much trace. This can feel deflating. All those years, and what do you have to show for it? But it can also feel freeing. The work wasn't the point. The point was living, providing, supporting yourself and maybe others, getting through, surviving. And you did that. You showed up. You did what needed doing. That's enough. You think about money, about whether you have enough, whether you'll be okay, whether you can afford to live out your remaining years with dignity and independence, or whether you'll run out, whether you'll become dependent, whether you'll be a burden. This worry runs through many elder minds at night. It's primal. This fear of destitution, of losing control, of having to depend on others who may or may not be willing or able to help, of losing your home or your autonomy or your ability to care for yourself. If you're financially secure, this fear is muted but not entirely absent. You wonder if you've calculated correctly, if the money will actually last, if some unexpected expense will wipe out what you've saved, if inflation or medical costs or some crisis you can't anticipate will leave you vulnerable. If you're not financially secure, the fear is louder, more constant. You lie here calculating, trying to figure out how to make what you have stretch far enough, trying not to panic about the gap between what you need and what you have, trying to make peace with a vulnerability that feels terrifying. You think about the choices you made about money when you were younger, the jobs you took or didn't take, the money you saved or didn't save, the investments you made or didn't make, the frivolous purchases, the necessary expenses, the times you were generous and the times you were stingy, all of it adding up to your current situation. Some of those choices you'd make differently now. Some you wouldn't change, but they're made. They're done. You can't go back. You can only deal with the consequences, with what you have now, with the reality of your situation, rather than what you wish it was. You think about regret. This is unavoidable. Everyone who lives long enough accumulates regrets. Paths not taken, risks not risked, words not said, chances missed, mistakes made, people hurt, time wasted, potential unfulfilled. Your regrets visit you at night. They show up unbidden. They replay scenes from your life where you wish you'd acted differently, spoken up, stayed silent, been braver, been kinder, been smarter, been more aware. You think about the person you didn't marry, the job you didn't take, the place you didn't move to, the friendship you didn't maintain, the opportunity you let pass, the moment you were cruel when you could have been compassionate, the time you were absent when you should have been present. These regrets ache. They sit in your chest. They make you wish you could go back. Do it over. Be different. Choose better. But you can't. Time only moves forward. The past is fixed, unchangeable. All you can do is carry the regret and try to learn from it and attempt not to repeat the same patterns with whatever time remains. But you also know that regret is natural, that it comes from having lived, from having made choices, from having been human and imperfect and limited in your awareness. You couldn't have known then what you know now. You made decisions with the information and the maturity and the circumstances you had at the time. Or would you make different choices with your current wisdom? Of course, but you didn't have that wisdom then. You had to live through things to gain it. That's how wisdom works. It's retrospective. It arrives after the fact, after the mistakes have been made and the consequences have unfolded and the lessons have been learned the hard way. So you try to forgive yourself. Try to hold your younger self with compassion rather than judgment. Try to recognize that you are doing your best even when your best wasn't very good. Try to accept that regret is part of the human experience, that everyone carries it, that it's the price of having lived long enough to look back and see clearly what you couldn't see while you were in it. You think about the future, what's left of it, how you want to spend the time remaining, what matters now, what you still want to experience or accomplish or understand before you die. The future looks different from this vantage point than it looked when you were younger. It's shorter, obviously, more compressed, more finite. You can see the horizon in a way you couldn't before. You know that the runway is limited, that there isn't time for everything, that you have to choose carefully how you spend what remains. This clarity is both frightening and freeing. Frightening because it forces you to confront your own mortality, your own ending. The fact that this life you're living will stop, that there will be a last day, a last breath, a final moment after which you won't exist anymore in this form. But it's also freeing because it cuts through the bullshit. It makes clear what matters and what doesn't. It removes the luxury of procrastination, of waiting for someday, of putting off what's important in favor of what's urgent. It demands that you live now, that you prioritize what actually matters, that you stop wasting time on things that don't serve you or bring you joy or align with your values. You think about what you still want to do. Maybe there are places you want to see, people you want to spend time with, experiences you want to have, things you want to create or learn or understand. You make mental lists, you imagine possibilities, you consider what's actually feasible, given your circumstances and your limitations and your resources. Some of what you want is still possible. Some isn't. You're learning to distinguish between the two, learning to let go of what's no longer realistic while pursuing what remains within reach, learning to adjust your dreams to match your reality without giving up entirely on the desire for newness and growth and experience. You think about legacy, about what you'll leave behind, what people will remember about you, what impact you've had, whether your life mattered beyond yourself, whether you made the world even slightly better by being in it. This question sits heavy some nights. You wonder if you've done enough, been enough, given enough, whether you've left anything of value, whether anyone will remember you after you're gone, whether your existence will echo forward in any meaningful way. You think about your children if you have them. They're your most obvious legacy, your contribution to the future, the way your DNA and your values and your influence continue beyond your own life. You hope you've given them something good, something solid, something that will help them live well, and maybe pass on to their own children. You think about work you've done, things you've created, projects you've completed, problems you've solved, people you've helped. Small contributions that maybe mattered to someone, even if they didn't change the world. You hope these things counted for something, that they added up to a life that had purpose and meaning beyond just your own survival and pleasure. But you also wonder if legacy matters at all. if it's just an ego thing, a way of trying to cheat death by leaving something behind, a refusal to accept that you're temporary, that everything ends, that most of what we do is forgotten, that the universe is vast and indifferent, and your individual life, however meaningful to you, is ultimately insignificant in the grand scheme. Maybe it's enough to have lived, to have experienced being conscious, to have loved and been loved, to have felt sunlight and tasted food and heard music and touched skin and watched seasons change. Maybe the point isn't to leave a mark, but simply to be fully present for the brief time you're here, to participate in existence without needing it to mean something beyond itself. These thoughts circle through your mind. There's no resolution, no final answer, just the ongoing consideration, the nighttime contemplation of what it all means and what it all meant and what it will mean when it's over. You're starting to feel sleep approaching now, that gentle heaviness, that softening of thoughts, that blurring of the boundary between waking and dreaming. Your mind is slowing, the urgent processing giving way to something more peaceful, more accepting, more ready to rest. The thoughts don't stop entirely, they never do, but they become quieter, less demanding. They drift rather than insist. They float rather than grab. You can observe them without being pulled into them, without needing to solve or resolve or figure anything out. You're old enough now to know that not everything needs to be understood. Not everything needs to be fixed. Some things you simply carry. Some questions don't have answers. Some pain doesn't heal completely. Some mysteries remain mysterious. And that's okay. That's part of being human, part of being alive, part of having lived long enough to accumulate more questions than answers. You settle deeper into the mattress now. Your body knows this rhythm, this nightly ritual of gradually releasing the day, of allowing muscle to soften, of permitting thought to slow. You've done this thousands of times, tens of thousands. Your body has its own wisdom about how to prepare for sleep. You think about mortality, not in an abstract way, but in a concrete, personal way. You think about your own death, when it will come, how it will come, whether you'll have warning or whether it will arrive suddenly without preparation, without the chance to say goodbye or finish things or make peace with the ending. This thought doesn't terrify you the way it might have when you were younger. You've lived with it long enough now that it's become familiar. Not comfortable exactly, but known, acknowledged. A reality you've accepted even if you haven't fully embraced it. You wonder what dying will feel like, whether it will hurt, whether you'll be afraid in those final moments, whether you'll fight it or surrender to it, whether there will be clarity or confusion, peace or panic. You've watched other people die. You've sat beside deathbeds. You've witnessed the transition from living to not living. But you still don't know what it will be like from the inside. You think about what comes after, if anything comes after. You've held beliefs about this at various points in your life. Maybe you still hold them. Maybe they've changed. Maybe you've become more certain, or less certain, or simply more comfortable with uncertainty. If you believe in an afterlife, you imagine what that might be like. Reunion with people you've loved and lost. release from physical pain and limitation, continuation of consciousness in some form you can't quite picture, judgment or acceptance or transformation into something beyond what you can currently comprehend. If you don't believe in an afterlife, you contemplate what it means to simply end, to cease, to stop being conscious, to return to the same state of non-existence you were in before you were born. This isn't frightening necessarily, just strange to consider that you will be and then you won't be, that everything you've experienced and thought and felt and known will simply stop. Either way, there's mystery. Either way, there's unknown territory ahead. Either way, you're moving towards something you can't fully understand or prepare for. All you can do is live as well as possible with whatever time remains. Make peace where peace is possible. Express love where love exists. Attempt to tie up loose ends, even knowing that some ends can never be tied. You think about your parents' deaths if they've passed. You remember how it changed you, how their absence created a shift in your understanding of yourself and your place in the world. When they were alive, even if you were estranged or distant or had a complicated relationship, you were still someone's child. Their existence meant you weren't the oldest generation. You weren't next. But once they died, you became the oldest generation in your family. You moved up in line. You became the one people looked to as the elder, the one with the most years, the most experience, the most proximity to death. This shift happened whether you felt ready for it or not, whether you wanted it or not. You remember their final days if you were present for them, the way their bodies failed, the way consciousness flickered and faded, the way they became less themselves and then not themselves at all. The strange experience of watching someone you've known your entire life become unrecognizable, become just a body, become empty of the person who inhabited that body. You remember the moment they stopped breathing, how final it was, how immediate the difference between alive and dead. One moment there was a person, the next moment there was remains. The transition was instantaneous, even if the dying took time. You remember what you felt, grief certainly, but also relief maybe if they'd been suffering, or guilt for feeling relieved, or numbness, or unexpected calmness, or complicated emotions you couldn't name. Death brings out feelings that don't make sense, that contradict each other, that surprise you with their intensity or their absence. You think about whether you'll die like they did, whether their deaths predict your own, whether the same diseases will claim you, whether you'll face similar deterioration, whether your children will sit beside your deathbed the way you sat beside theirs, whether you'll become unrecognizable too, whether you'll slip away gradually or suddenly, whether you'll be ready or resistant. You think about your body after you die. What will happen to it? Whether you'll be buried or cremated or donated to science. Whether anyone will visit your grave if you have one. Whether your ashes will be scattered somewhere meaningful or sit in an urn on someone's shelf. Whether any of this matters at all. You've probably made decisions about this. Probably have documents specifying your wishes. Probably have talked to family members about what you want. But lying here at night, you wonder if those wishes will be honored. if anyone will care enough to follow through, if it makes any difference anyway, once you're gone and no longer aware of what happens to the body you left behind. You think about the people who will continue living after you die. Your children, your grandchildren, if you have them, your friends, your community, the world itself. Life will go on without you. People will get up in the morning and go about their days, and you won't be part of it anymore. You'll be the one who's gone. The one people remember occasionally. The one who used to be here but isn't anymore. This is both humbling and oddly comforting. Humbling because it makes clear how replaceable you are, how little your absence will disrupt the ongoing flow of life. The world doesn't need you. It will function fine without you. Your contribution, while meaningful to you, is ultimately dispensable. But it's also comforting because it means you can let go. You don't have to hold everything together. You don't have to be responsible for everything. Life will continue. People will figure things out. The sun will rise and set. Seasons will change. The world will keep turning exactly as it always has. Your presence or absence doesn't alter the fundamental rhythms of existence. You think about technology. How much has changed during your lifetime? You remember a world without computers, without internet, without cell phones, without all the devices that now seem essential. You remember when communication was slower, when you had to wait for letters, when long-distance phone calls were expensive and brief, when being unreachable was normal. You've adapted to some of the changes. You probably use technology daily. Email, maybe texting, maybe video calls with distant family. Maybe social media, though, that feels strange and uncomfortable. The pace of it, the performative nature, the way people present curated versions of their lives rather than the messy reality. But you also feel left behind by technology. It moves too fast, changes too constantly, requires too much learning and relearning. You get comfortable with something, and it updates, and you have to figure it out again. You feel competent, and then something new arrives, and you feel incompetent again. Lost, confused, dependent on younger people to help you navigate systems that seem designed for people unlike you. This dependency bothers you. You remember being the competent one, the one people came to for help, the one with answers. Now you're asking basic questions, struggling with things that seem effortless for others, feeling old and slow and outdated, like the world has moved on and you're still standing in the past trying to understand what happened. You think about how younger people see you, whether they see you at all. You've become aware that you're often invisible. People look past you, dismiss you, treat you as irrelevant, as if your opinions don't matter. Your experiences don't count. Your presence is just background noise in their busy, important lives. This invisibility is painful. You're the same person you've always been. Your mind works. Your thoughts have value. Your life has given you knowledge that younger people haven't acquired yet. But they don't want to hear it. They think you're out of touch, behind the times, unable to understand their modern problems and their modern solutions. Sometimes you are out of touch. Sometimes you don't understand. Sometimes the world has changed in ways that make your experience less relevant. But sometimes you have wisdom they need. Sometimes you understand patterns they can't see yet. Sometimes your perspective would help them avoid mistakes you've already made. But they're not listening. They're not asking. They've already decided you have nothing to offer. You think about the respect that used to be given to elders, how in previous generations or in other cultures, older people were valued for their experience, sought out for guidance, honored for having survived long enough to accumulate wisdom. That's not how it works anymore. Now youth is prized. Novelty is valued. Innovation matters more than experience. The old ways are dismissed as outdated. The old people are dismissed along with them. You understand both sides of this. You remember being young and dismissing your own elders, thinking they didn't understand, thinking their time had passed, thinking you knew better. So you can't really blame young people for doing the same to you. It's the natural order, the cycle repeating. Each generation convinced they're smarter than the last. Each generation having to learn the same hard lessons firsthand because they won't accept that anyone else's experience applies to them. But understanding doesn't make it hurt less, doesn't make the invisibility easier to bear, doesn't change the fact that you have things to offer and no one's interested in receiving them. You're living through a long, slow process of becoming irrelevant, of having your place in the world shrink, of mattering less and less until you don't matter at all, except to the small circle of people who love you. You think about health, about doctor's appointments and medications and test results, about the ongoing maintenance your body requires, about the careful monitoring, the vigilance, the awareness that things can go wrong, that they likely will go wrong, that aging is a process of gradual failure, systems breaking down, functions diminishing, capabilities reducing. You take pills now. Multiple pills, probably. You have routines around them. Morning pills, evening pills, pills with food, pills without food, pills for blood pressure, for cholesterol, for diabetes, for pain, for sleep, for digestion, for conditions you never heard of until you develop them, for prevention of worse things that might happen if you don't take the pills. The pills keep you alive. You know this. You're grateful for modern medicine, for the ability to manage conditions that would have killed you in previous generations, for the extra years these medications provide. But you also resent them, resent the dependency, resent the side effects, resent the daily reminder that your body can't maintain itself anymore, that you require chemical intervention just to function normally. You think about the appointments, the waiting rooms, the medical tests, the indignities of having your body examined and evaluated and discussed, the loss of privacy, the vulnerability of being a patient, of being subject to medical authority, of having to advocate for yourself while also deferring to expertise you don't possess. You've learned to navigate the medical system. You've learned to speak up, to ask questions, to push back when something doesn't seem right. You've learned that doctors are fallible, that they don't always listen, that you have to be your own advocate because no one else will be. But you're also tired of it, tired of appointments, tired of tests, tired of managing your health as if it's a full-time job, tired of thinking about your body constantly, monitoring symptoms, tracking changes, wondering if every new ache is significant or if it's just normal aging, wondering when to worry and when to ignore, wondering how much vigilance is appropriate and how much is just anxiety. You think about pain. You probably live with some level of pain most of the time. Maybe it's minor. Maybe it's significant. Maybe it varies day to day. Maybe it's constant. But it's there. Your body hurts in ways it didn't used to hurt, in ways you can't completely fix or eliminate, in ways you've had to learn to live with. This is harder than people who don't live with chronic pain understand. It's exhausting, it's draining, it affects everything: your mood, your energy, your ability to do things, your willingness to make plans, your enjoyment of activities that used to bring pleasure. Pain creates a constant background static that interferes with everything else. You've developed strategies for managing it. Medication, heat, cold, movement, rest, distraction, acceptance. Some days the strategies work. Some days they don't. Some days the pain wins. You cancel plans. You stay home. You move carefully. You protect yourself from activities that will make it worse. Other people don't always understand. They think you're exaggerating or being dramatic or giving up too easily. They think you should just push through, just ignore it, just decide not to let it limit you, as if willpower alone could override what your body is actually experiencing, as if pain is a choice you could simply opt out of if you tried harder. You've stopped explaining, stopped defending yourself, stopped trying to make people understand something they can't understand unless they experience it themselves. You just manage as best you can. You do what you can do. You skip what you can't do. You make peace with limitations that feel unfair, but are nonetheless real. You think about independence, how much you've lost, how much you're afraid of losing. This matters deeply. Your independence has been central to your identity, your ability to take care of yourself, to make your own decisions, to live on your own terms. Losing this feels like losing yourself. Maybe you've already lost some independence. Maybe you can't drive anymore. Maybe you need help with tasks you used to do easily. Maybe you've had to move from your home to somewhere more manageable. Maybe you depend on others for transportation, or cooking, or cleaning, or financial management. Each loss chips away at your sense of autonomy, your sense of being a fully functional adult, rather than someone who requires caretaking. You fight against this loss. You insist on doing things yourself, even when it's harder, even when accepting help would be easier, because accepting help feels like admitting defeat, like acknowledging that you're declining, that you're becoming dependent, that you're moving toward a future where you'll need more and more assistance until eventually you'll need help with everything. This future terrifies you. The possibility of losing control over your own life, of having decisions made for you, of being placed somewhere you don't want to be because you can no longer manage on your own, of becoming a burden to your children or other family members, of requiring care you can't provide for yourself and maybe can't afford to pay others to provide. You've seen this happen to other people. Friends, family members, people who were independent and capable and suddenly weren't. People who lost their homes, their autonomy, their dignity. People who ended up in facilities where they were cared for but not happy, where they were safe but not home, where they were alive but not living in any meaningful sense. You don't want that for yourself. You want to die before it comes to that. You want to remain independent until the end. You want to live in your own home and manage your own affairs and make your own choices right up until you die. But you know you might not get what you want. You know that decline doesn't always cooperate with preferences, that you might lose capacity before you lose life, that there might be years of dependency before the final release. This uncertainty sits heavy. The not knowing, the inability to control what happens, the understanding that despite all your planning and all your wishes, you might end up exactly where you don't want to be. Helpless, dependent, diminished, waiting for death in circumstances you would never have chosen. You think about your home, the place where you live now, whether it's the home you've had for decades or somewhere you moved to more recently, whether it's the right size or too big or too small, whether it works for your current needs or whether it's becoming problematic. If you've lived in the same place for many years, you think about all the life that's happened within these walls, all the moments, all the changes. Children growing up here, celebrations and arguments, ordinary days and extraordinary days. This space holds your history. Every room contains memories. Every corner has associations. You know all the quirks of this place. The floorboard that creaks, the door that sticks, the window that doesn't close quite right. These imperfections are familiar, comfortable. They make this place yours in a way a perfect new place could never be. This is home not because it's ideal, but because it's known, because you've lived here, because your life is embedded in its structure. But you also think about whether you can stay here, whether the stairs are becoming dangerous, whether the maintenance is becoming too much, whether the isolation is a problem, whether this space that served you well for decades is now becoming a limitation, whether it's time to move somewhere more practical, more manageable, more appropriate for this stage of life. The thought of leaving tears at you. This isn't just a house. It's your home. It's where you belong. It's filled with the remnants of your life. Objects you've collected. Furniture you've chosen. Photos documenting your history. The accumulated stuff of decades. How would you sort through it all? What would you keep? What would you discard? How would you compress a lifetime into whatever smaller space you'd be moving to? And where would you go? An apartment, a smaller house, a retirement community. Each option involves losses, less space, different surroundings, unfamiliar neighbors, the loss of the life you've built in this location, the community you're part of, the routines you've established, the sense of belonging that comes from having been somewhere long enough to be known. You don't want to decide. You want to stay right here. But you also know that circumstances might force a decision, a fall, an illness, an inability to manage. Your children might insist, doctors might recommend, reality might require, and you'll have to go whether you want to or not, whether you're ready or not. You'll have to leave this place that's been home and create home somewhere else, or accept that home as you've known it is finished. You think about stuff, all the possessions you've accumulated, the things that fill your closets and drawers and storage spaces. Some of it matters, some of it's meaningless, some of it you haven't looked at in years, some of it you look at every day. You think about what will happen to it all after you die. Who will want it? Who will take it? What will be valued and what will be discarded? You probably have things you imagine your children will treasure, things you think are valuable or meaningful or important to preserve. But you also suspect they won't want most of it. They have their own stuff, their own lives, their own aesthetic. They don't want your furniture or your dishes or your decorations. They don't have room. They don't have interest. This is painful to consider. These objects that mean something to you being rejected, donated, thrown away. The things you've cherished being seen as junk. The items you've carefully maintained having no value to anyone else. Your life reduced to trash bags and donation boxes. Your possessions sorted by strangers at estate sales who don't know the stories attached to these objects, who don't care that this painting hung in your childhood home, or that these dishes were a wedding gift, or that this chair was where you nursed your babies. You want to start sorting through it now, getting rid of things while you can control where they go, making decisions about what stays and what goes, not leaving this burden for your children, not making them deal with decades of accumulation while they're grieving. But you can't quite do it, can't quite face the process of dismantling your life, of acknowledging that these things won't be needed soon, that you're preparing for your own absence. So it sits, all of it, waiting, becoming a problem you know you should address but keep avoiding. You think about patience, how you have more of it now than you used to, how urgency has decreased, how you can let things unfold at their own pace without forcing, without pushing, without needing immediate resolution. Time has taught you that most things work themselves out eventually. That rushing rarely helps. That patience is a skill worth cultivating, and you've had decades to cultivate it. But you also have less patience for certain things, less tolerance for pretense, for superficiality, for wasted time. You don't want to sit through boring conversations, don't want to attend obligations that don't matter, don't want to be polite when honesty would be better. You've earned the right to say no, to set boundaries, to prioritize what actually matters to you over what's expected or conventional or what other people want. This directness surprises people sometimes. They expect elders to be gentle, accommodating, easy. But you've lived too long to care about that. You'll be kind, but you won't be fake. You'll be respectful, but you won't be silent. You'll be considerate, but you won't be a doormat. You know who you are. You know what matters. You're not going to spend your remaining time pretending otherwise. You think about joy. What brings you joy now? What makes life worth living despite everything? Despite the losses and the limitations and the awareness of mortality? Despite the pain and the grief and the ongoing diminishment of age? there's still joy. Still moments that make you glad to be alive. Still experiences that feel precious and worthwhile. Maybe it's simple things. Morning coffee, sunshine on your face, a conversation with someone you love, a good meal, music that moves you, beauty that catches your attention, the changing seasons, the persistence of nature, the resilience of life asserting itself despite everything. Maybe it's relationships, time with children or grandchildren, deep connections with friends who know you completely, the comfort of familiar faces, the pleasure of being truly seen and understood, the gift of love that's lasted, that survived everything, that remains despite all the reasons it could have failed. Maybe it's meaning, work you're still doing that matters, causes you contribute to, ways you're still useful, still needed, still making a difference, however small. The knowledge that your presence in the world still has purpose, still creates value, still matters to someone. Whatever brings you joy, you've learned to notice it, to appreciate it, to be present for it, to not take it for granted. You know that joy is temporary, that circumstances change, that nothing lasts. So when joy appears, you receive it fully. You let yourself feel it completely. You don't diminish it or dismiss it or waste it by being somewhere else mentally. You're here, experiencing this moment, grateful for it, aware of its preciousness. You think about peace, whether you've found it, whether you're still searching for it yet, what it means to be at peace with your life as it's been lived, with yourself as you are, with the world as it is. This feels like the work of aging, this gradual movement toward acceptance, toward peace, toward a settled relationship with reality that doesn't require it to be different than it is. You fought against reality for most of your life, wanted things to be other than they were, resisted what you didn't like, pushed back against circumstances you didn't choose. This fighting was necessary sometimes, important. It created change. It prevented resignation. It kept you engaged with life rather than passive in the face of it. But the fighting is exhausting. And at some point, you have to decide what's worth fighting and what's worth accepting. What you can change and what you can't. What deserves your energy and what doesn't. Peace comes from making these distinctions, from directing your limited energy toward what matters and releasing what doesn't. You're working on this. Some days you achieve it. You feel settled, accepting, at peace with how things are. Other days, you're still fighting, still resisting, still angry about losses or limitations or injustices, still wanting things to be different. The work isn't finished. Maybe it never finishes. Maybe peace is something you practice, rather than something you achieve permanently. You think about legacy again, but differently than before. Earlier, you thought about what you'll leave behind. Now you think about what you've received, the legacy that was handed to you, the gifts you've been given, the ways previous generations shaped you and gave you things to carry forward. You think about your parents differently now than you did earlier in life. You see them not just as your parents, but as people who had their own struggles, their own wounds, their own limitations. They gave you what they could give. They withheld what they couldn't provide. They did damage, and they did good. They were human, imperfect, doing their best within their own constraints. What they gave you wasn't perfect, but it was something. It was a foundation, a starting point. They kept you alive. They provided for your basic needs. They gave you whatever love they were capable of giving. This matters, even if it wasn't enough, even if you needed more. What you received from them was the beginning of your story, the raw material you've worked with throughout your life. You've done the same for your own children if you have them. You've given them what you could. You've withheld what you couldn't provide. You've done damage and you've done good. You've been human, imperfect, doing your best within your own constraints. And they'll spend their lives making sense of what you gave them, processing it, healing from the damage, appreciating the gifts, passing on what works and trying not to pass on what doesn't. This is how it works. This is the pattern. Each generation receives and gives. Each generation is shaped by what came before and shapes what comes after. Each generation does better in some ways and worse in others. The work continues. The effort persists. The attempt to live well and love well and give well continues despite the impossibility of doing any of it perfectly. You're feeling sleep closer now, very close. Your thoughts are becoming dreamlike, less linear, less coherent. Images are mixing with words. Memories are blending with imagination. You're drifting, floating, moving toward that state that's neither awake nor fully asleep. That transitional space where consciousness loosens its grip and something else takes over. Your body is completely relaxed now, heavy, sinking into the mattress, held by the bed, covered by blankets. Safe, warm, comfortable. All the physical adjusting is done. All the positioning is complete. You're settled, still, ready. Your mind releases its grip on the thoughts that have occupied it. They're still there. They'll return tomorrow night and the night after. But for now, they can rest. For now, you can let them go. For now, you can simply be here, breathing, present, alive in this moment, without needing to think about past or future, without needing to understand or resolve or figure anything out. You are here, in this bed, in this body, in this life. This moment is enough. This breath is enough. This peace, however temporary, is enough. You don't need anything more right now. You don't need to be anywhere else. You don't need to do anything. You can simply rest. The thoughts that run through your mind at night have done their work. They've processed. They've remembered. They've contemplated. They've made what sense can be made. Now they can quiet. Now they can settle like dust after wind. Now they can allow you the rest you need, the restoration you deserve, the peace that comes from finally, temporarily, letting everything go. Sleep is coming. You can feel it. That gentle tide pulling you under. That soft darkness welcoming you. That release from consciousness that happens every night. That small death and rebirth that keeps you human. That keeps you living. That gives you the strength to wake tomorrow and face another day and carry your thoughts and your memories and your life forward one more time. You've done well tonight. You've been honest with yourself. You've faced what needed facing. You've remembered what needed remembering. You've honored your life by taking time to consider it, by giving it the attention it deserves, by recognizing that what you think about in the darkness matters, that these nighttime contemplations are part of how you make sense of having lived, of being alive, of moving toward death while still embracing life. Rest now. Let your breath slow. Let your mind empty. Let sleep take you where it will. You're safe here. You're home. You're exactly where you need to be. Tomorrow will come with its own demands and its own gifts. But tonight is for rest. Tonight is for peace. Tonight is for the gentle release of consciousness into dreams. The fires die down, the stories settle, and the world grows still. Let your thoughts drift away like embers on the wind. Good night. You've journeyed far through time tonight. Now it's time to journey into dreams. Close your eyes, breathe, and let sleep find you.